Good afternoon, everyone. This is one of my favorite days of the year. I'm so glad you're here, and we are going to be entering into our last session of the day. Those of you that attended last year's conference may recall the final session, which focused on advocating for women's health and featured three brave women who transparently shared their breast cancer battles with us. In planning this year's conference theme, the word health, resiliency, and prosperity resonated with our planning committee, and we wanted to focus a conference session around mental health. During our next session, we will hear from speaker and author Jen Babakhan, who will be sharing her story with us, followed by Nora Hanna interviewing a panel of courageous women who will share their mental health journeys with us. Earlier today, we heard Jane talk about proximity, connections, and how she came to know Tyler. It was through a conversation that I had with Jen Babakhan's husband, Ed, who is a coworker of mine at the San Joaquin County Office of Education, that led to Jen speaking to our conference today. It was over 5 years ago that Ed shared Jen's story with me. It resonated with me, and I can't wait for you to hear her story today. Jen Babakhan is an author and literary agent living in California with her husband and two young sons. Her books detoured the messy, grace-filled journey from working professional to stay-at-home mom and Disrupted, Finding Peace with a Parent's Terminal Illness, ignited a love of serving readers through personal and poignant stories that point to God's enduring love. She loves sharing hilarious memes on social media, anything coffee flavored, spending days at the beach, and snuggling with her two stubborn Shih Tzus. Her writings have appeared in Reader's Digest, guideposts, and various national news outlets. We are excited to announce a book giveaway that's going to feature Jen's book, Detoured. If you would like to receive a copy, please click on the link in the chat and complete the information. And now, please join me in welcoming Jen Babakhan.
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here today. Um, I am just going to share my screen so we can get started here. Um, Everything looking okay, Jess, there? Okay, good deal. So thank you for that lovely introduction. As Jess said, my husband and she work together, and I'm just honored to be here today. My life has taken quite a detour several times over, and so I'm excited to kind of share that with all of you. I wanted to talk today about the way that we can maintain our mental health during changes in our life that we may not see coming. Um, I'm a California Valley girl through and through. I grew up in Modesto, went to CSU Stanislaus, got a communications degree, and planned on going into marketing or journalism or something like that. Took a marketing position at Medical Alert Foundation International. And while I was there, I discovered that I truly loved teaching. So I had originally thought I was going to go into that when I was in college. And then I just had a couple of experiences in the classroom that made me wonder if I really wanted to be in a room full of crazy children all the time. And so I opted for an office job. And when I got that office job, I realized that perhaps I had made the wrong choice. So went back to school, got my teaching credential, and taught third grade. And I absolutely adored it. It was incredible. And it was during that time that my husband and I decided that we wanted to start trying to have a family. And that was during, I think, my third year of teaching third grade, and had the baby and had every intention of going back to work. And during that time, within the first 3 months of his life, we realized that he had a really severe milk protein sensitivity. And he was actually like bleeding internally. And it was at that point that I felt like God was calling me to stay home. And I really did not want to, oops, I didn't mean to do that. That's okay. I really did not want to be home at that time because my plan was just to go on teaching like I had seen all of my other coworkers do. And so I really felt like I was just in this battle of wills between God and myself, and I felt as though um, I just didn't know what to do at that point, but I knew that I needed to take a leave of absence and be home with him during that time and see where God led me. And what I found is that fighting with God really is not going to work out in the end. And so he typically will make his point, and he absolutely did. And so um I ended up quitting teaching, and in that process I, lost my community. I lost the teacher friends that I had known during that time and loved. And I like to say that when I think back on that time, it was just a lot of like diapers, dishes, and depression. It was the triple three that was just really, really hard for me. And I can remember that I just had this feeling of feeling so lost and feeling as though I was just really, really lonely is really what it came down to. And when you're a new mom, all of your time and effort goes into a baby, and so you don't really have time to maintain the friendships that you once did. And I tell a story in the book about going through the line at the grocery store, and I was making cake balls for Christmas. And I remember she asked me what I was making, and I said I was making cake balls, and she seemed so friendly that I just thought maybe she'll be friends with me. It was this really vulnerable moment of desperation, and I wrote down the recipe on the back of a receipt that I pulled out of my purse, and I was like, "Here's my phone number in case you might want more information." It's like she didn't need more information, she could have Googled it. But I was just so desperate for community and to talk to anyone outside of like my 3 or 4 month old at home. And it was that at that point where I started to think I needed something just for myself. And so I kind of thought back to what I loved as a child, what I loved growing up, and that was writing. And so I started um, looking for ways that I could write from home online. I had a few little jobs, and then I saw this opening for a writer for Reader's Digest. And at that time, I just thought, this is crazy, but I'm going to apply for this, and we'll see where it goes. And I ended up getting hired as a freelance writer for Reader's Digest. Um, and it was in that moment, I think, that I realized that in any circumstance that we find ourselves in, um, there's always a way to come back to yourself and find those things that make it uh, more bearable for you, because I really felt that I had just lost that sparkle in my life. And it was in writing again that I found kind of the truth of who I was and who I was meant to be. And it was incredible. I was able to interview people from all walks of life. And in some moments it was really intimidating. And I just thought, how in the world am I here even talking to this person? But I had a toddler at my feet, and I was just doing the thing. So that was a really important lesson for me, was to think about those things that I loved as a child, and then going back to it and finding that self-expression through writing. That's what then led me to think about how difficult it was for me to leave my career. Because there's so much in the media about working moms versus stay-at-home moms, and I always envisioned that I would be a working mom. I was not someone that went to school and got my credential and my degrees and expected to just put them to rest and set them to the side while I raised my kids. And so I started to think, okay, if this was a difficult transition for me, maybe it was for other women as well, or maybe it is for other women as well, that can feel that kind of stigma that comes with giving it all up to be home with your kids. And so I started just kind of thinking about, okay, what would a book look like? Um, and then Detoured was born. I got a literary agent against all the odds. And she believed in my book, which was even more shocking to me. And then right as that book was going to be coming out to be published, Mother's Day weekend of 2017, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we were told when she was diagnosed that she had about, I think they gave her about 6 to 8 weeks to live at that time. Um, the thing that was so shocking about it is she had gone into the hospital for high blood pressure. None of us knew there was anything wrong with her outside of her blood pressure. And so when I got that call saying that they thought they had found cancer, and not only was it cancer, but it was stage 4 and completely throughout her body, it sent me into quite a tailspin. And it was in that moment that I really questioned what was even happening, because here I was thinking I was so excited about this book being released, and now my mom was dying. And it was a horrific time, and it just felt like the ground had fallen out from underneath me. And I once again thought about um, how I was going to find my way through it. Because when your world is turned upside down, it doesn't feel like you have a whole lot to cling to. And um, it was just a really difficult time. Um, Thankfully, we got a second opinion, and they did let us know that she was able to have treatment. It wasn't curable, but she could have treatment. Um, and it was so interesting during that time. Reader's Digest had no idea that my mom had been diagnosed. But suddenly I was receiving all of these assignments to interview doctors that were on the cutting edge of cancer treatments and cancer patients themselves. And the experience with my mom gave me such an empathy that I would not have been able to have before, and an understanding for their families of the deep pain of that process. Um, and so it was incredible to me, because I believe it was a way that God was still bringing me hope, because I was able to speak to these doctors on these cutting edge treatments, and then call my mom and say, hey, I just read about this, or I just wrote about this. Maybe this is something. Maybe this is something that down the line we can utilize. And those people that I spoke to were such a blessing. They all said, there's anything I can do for your mom, please call me, please let me know. So it just felt like kind of that life draft during that time when everything felt so unstable, to know that I wasn't alone, to know that others were in the same situation and had come out the other side, and we're okay. So Detoured was published in 2019, and it was a miracle that my mom was around to hold it in her hands. She had always been the biggest proponent of my writing, and even when I was going into all different, when I went into teaching and when I went into marketing and all of these things, she was like, don't you think you should write? You've always loved to write. And I was like, Mom, you don't know, right? You don't know, because kids never think that their moms know anything. And so she was able to hold the book. And then about 6 months later, the pandemic happened. So 2020 comes around, and that week that we were put on shutdown in March, my mom went into hospice. And to have the world falling apart at the same time that I felt like my personal world was being turned upside down was really a surreal experience. Nothing felt right. And I just didn't know. On one hand, it was somewhat comforting because the rest of the world didn't know what was happening either. But I had this extra layer of my mom was dying, And it was just a really difficult experience. And once again, I turned to writing. I look back on it now and I think, did I really need to complete those work assignments during the week that she was dying? And I think I did. I think I needed to do those things. And I think we all know what we need um, in these moments that are really difficult. We may look back and question our choices, um, but we can trust ourselves to know what we need in the moment and then provide that to ourselves. And for me, continuing to write and continuing to meet my deadlines and everything, that helped me to feel like I had a sense of control, at least over that corner of my life. I have a statistic on the screen here that says women are twice as likely as men to be affected by general anxiety disorder. And that's something that I have had all of my life. So it wasn't a surprise to me that postpartum hit me as hard as it did. And I still continued to have such anxiety. And then, of course, with my mom's illness, it just doubled down and I was feeling even more anxious. And so it was really, really vital for me during that time to figure out what it was going to take for me to feel safe in my body again, because it all just felt like it was too much, and it was. I think all of that happened during that time period was so much to deal with for all of us. So the shutdown happened, I believe it was like mid-March, and my mom passed away on March 29th of 2020. And it was a time, I come from a small family. It's just my brother and I, and my father. And to lose my mom was just life-changing for all of us. It was truly just really difficult, and trying to figure out how to move on after, not even move on, I don't want to use that word, how to build this new grief into our current lives, and like what does life look like now, and how does your life grow around that loss? Because it doesn't, for me anyway, it doesn't get easier, it doesn't go away, it doesn't get smaller. That grief is just as substantial as it was in the beginning. But trying to figure out how to continue on. I had at the time, my boys were 5 and 7 when they lost their grandmother, who they were very close to. So it was not only handling my grief, but it was their grief on top of it, which at times felt even more overwhelming because it didn't make sense for me. And so then for it to not make sense for them on any level at all as to why their grandmother was no longer in their life was really, really difficult. And again, I turned to writing. Again, I turned and thought, who else has had this experience and what does it look like to walk a parent through this? Because you know what? There were a lot of books on the loss of a parent. There were a lot of books on how to grieve after the loss of a parent, but I could not find a single book about the process of receiving a terminal diagnosis for a beloved parent and then walking them through that road and what it looked like on the other side of that as well. I wanted to encapsulate that entire journey. And on top of that, I didn't want it just to be my story either, because through my mom's illness, I had so many people that were also experiencing the same thing, and their parents may have had a different terminal illness. Maybe it was Alzheimer's, maybe it was heart disease, but we were all walking this journey. And I had this renewed sense of empathy for them because, all of us were doing the things that we never dreamed we would be doing while we had little kids at home. All of us were making specialty appointments for our parents or going to the pharmacy much more than we expected to do, explaining the impossible to our kids. All of us were doing this. And so when I thought about writing Disrupted, it was so important to me to include the voices of other women that had walked this road. And I did. I interviewed 7 other women about their beautiful parents, both fathers and mothers, their stories, as well as some mental health professionals on how they could cope with this journey as they were experiencing it. Because guess what, you don't have time for when you are raising little kids and a parent is dying. You don't have a ton of time for therapy for yourself. And so I thought it was just so important that I include that as well in that book. And so that book came out in 2024, and my prayer is that it touches people's lives, and that my pain can be turned into something that is useful, and that those other parents that are mentioned in the book, that their stories are honored as well. Um, and so now that brings me to the current place that I'm a literary agent and I'm helping other people to get their stories published. And and it's been an incredible journey. But through it all, the one constant has been change, right? It's been change. And so the question becomes, how can we ensure that we process change in a healthy way? Because a lot of times we are not given a roadmap. We're not given an option of whether we are going to experience change or not. It's just plopped into our laps. And so the thing that I most want people to know is that there is no getting around um, the fact that things are different. And the first step in that is just acknowledging that life looks different. We're not going to go through a very significant change in life and be able to just stuff it and set it to the side. We absolutely need to acknowledge it and acknowledge exactly what looks different. And the thing that I also want to say here is that even if you're going through a good change, um, there's still grief involved in that, because something is still being let go of to embrace the new. And one of the stories I like to tell about that illustrates this so well is that when my first son was about 2 years old, I wanted to take him to the park. And he refused to get in his car seat. And it was, one of these typical Valley days. It was like 105 degrees out. I was desperate to get out of the house because, as I said, diapers, dishes, and depression, like we were right there. And at that point in time, I still was fighting with God a little bit about completely quitting my job. I was on a leave of absence then. I remember we were in the garage and I was trying to get him in his car seat. He was screaming that he wanted to go in the backyard because he wanted he kept screaming grass. He wanted to see the grass in the backyard. And I was explaining to him that I was taking him to this beautiful park that we have near us that has these gorgeous trees. And I was reminding him, think of the playground. There's swings there, there's slides, all of these things. And he didn't want to hear any of it. He wanted the grass in his backyard. And it was then that I felt God say, you are no different than your toddler. I am trying to take you somewhere beautiful, but you only want what you know. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had to simply trust. I had to acknowledge that, yes, life looked different. And I had to trust that what was ahead was for my good, and was going to be good. Um, and so I would recommend that as you are giving yourself permission to mourn what was, even if you're going towards a good change, or if it's a bad change, it's important to mourn what was. And some of that grief is going to stay with you. I will forever mourn what was when my mom was on this side of heaven. That's not something that I think will ever change. But as you're mourning what was, I would encourage you to think about what remains the same. These are the things that are going to be your comfort. These are the things that you're going to hold on to. And I mean, this could be as simple as every day at 4 o'clock, I have an emotional support cup of coffee, right? Like it can be as simple as everything else in the world is shifting around me, but I do this one thing every day. Or, hey, I've lost my mom, but I still have a great group of friends. Or I still have all of these remaining family members that are in my life that matter. Um, I I think that when change happens, it's so easy for us to only focus on what we've lost instead of looking at the positive. I mean, studies have shown that our brains love to think about the negative more than they do the positive. Those are the things that we hold on to much more than the joyous things in our life. And so this isn't about toxic positivity of, okay, my mom died, but I'm going to focus on the fact that I still have my family. I think it's just a matter of trying to hold the tension of both at the same time so that one doesn't completely swallow the other. The other thing I recommend that people ask themselves is who do I want to be through this change? So, this is something that helps you separate that emotional experience from the lived reality. When change happens, such as having a tragedy in your life, you can get so swallowed into it that you lose your sense of agency and you lose any shred of control that you have. But we always have the ability to ask, who do I want to be during this? Right? Because that is what is going to carry you through those core values of how you react to something. We cannot control what happens to us. We can control how we react to it. And so really think about what values in your life do you align with and how do you want to live those out? Um, for me, during this time, I thought about the fact that my mom's death made me want to be a more present mom than ever. I wanted to be an encouraging wife and daughter and sister in my life. Um, and I just really wanted to live my life well. And be able to do it in a way that I was proud of at the end of the day. And I can't sit here and say that that happened immediately. This is a lot of therapy later that I'm on this side of it saying, think about your values and who do you want to be. But I can say that on this side of things, it's incredibly important to let yourself step out of it for just a moment, like hold it at arm's length for just a moment. You don't have to stay there long, but just allow yourself, invite yourself to think about um, if I could look back at this in 10 or 15 years, how do I want to say I handled it? Who was I to other people? Um, and trust also that God is going to give you what you need, and He's going to show you in really incredible ways His presence in your life. So this is just an example. After my mom died, I could not get enough of near-death experience stories. I was so enthralled by the idea of heaven and what she was experiencing and what she was doing. And I know in the Christian space, especially, there's kind of a lot of like, I don't know, like going back and forth on do we believe these? Do we not? You know, whatever. I'm on the I think they're an amazing way to get a peek into the other side. And I think God gives people those so that we can have hope and we can maintain a sense of joy in some ways. Anyway, so I had been doing nothing but reading these NDE or near death experience stories, and I had applied for a job to write at Guidepost, which is a Christian book and magazine and online company. And so when the editor called me to talk about what the project was, I had no idea what the project would be. She was very kind of hesitant at first. And then she said, well, how do you feel about near-death experiences? And I said, oh, I've done nothing but read them for like the last 6 months. And she said, well, this job is going to be you ghostwriting the near-death experiences of people. And you'll be interviewing them and hearing about their story. So it was this moment, just a really sweet moment for me of seeing that we are being taken care of on so many different levels that we don't even realize. And it was just a really incredible moment of knowing that that yeah, that everything that we experience in life, um, that someone's watching out for us, and that that we can trust that. We can trust that. Let's see here. Okay. So now I'd like you to ask yourself, what do you need to be that person and live out those values? So, um, for me, as I've clearly said, writing has been that thing for me. It's been a hobby that has always just been the way that I express myself, um, and it's been a way that I can give back to others. I have been so strengthened by the words of others, of hearing them say that my words have made a difference for them in their lives. Um, the other thing that's been really, really important for me is getting back into my body in like a physical way. I have a very dear friend that has always done yoga, has always been very involved in physically being fit and all of that. And I remember it was about a year after, yes, about a year after my mom died. And she said, "Would you mind if I enrolled you in a grief yoga class, or yoga for grief?" And I was like, okay, sure, I'll give it a go. And it was online, so I didn't have to go out. I mean, this was 2021, so the pandemic was still just raging. And I thought, if I can keep my camera off, there's like that's the main point for me. Let me keep my camera off, and then maybe I will try a downward dog, but we are not doing that with the camera on. And so I tried it, and I could not get over um how good it felt to be in a space with other women that we were doing these physical moves, but it was connected to our spirituality in such a way that was so unexpected for me. Those first classes, I just cried through class as I went through these movements, because it was like coming home to myself, and I just was so surprised by it. I did not in a million years think that a yoga class would help me process my grief and reconnect with myself in that way. It's still something I'm crazy about. I try to do yoga every day. It has been a lifeline for me through some really, really scary things since then that, have occurred. I have health anxiety, and so I'm one of these people that if I have to go in for health tests or anything like that, I am antsy beforehand. And so it's been such a gift for me to have yoga to go back to practice that deep breathing and find that space for me to reconnect with myself again. And so I would encourage you to think about, what is it in your life, a small change that would be the difference for you in being able to live out those values and become the person in just a little way, day by day, that you want to be able to look back on and say, you know what? I could have handled that a lot worse than I did. Maybe I didn't do it perfectly, but I did the best I could. Um, and those tiny little changes make the biggest difference by far. And so the last thing I'd like you to recognize is that our ultimate goal is always peace. And so changes are going to come, awful things are going to happen, great things are going to happen too. And even in those wonderful things that are happening, sometimes we can mistake that sense of excitement or anticipation for something not feeling right or something feeling scary. Um, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. That just means that you need to settle back into yourself and find what's going to bring that peace back to you again. And we have a sense of agency within us, no matter what it is that we're experiencing. I think if I can leave you with anything, it's that even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control, the one thing that we have control over is ourselves. What we do in that moment of chaos. We get to choose how we respond. We get to choose how we come back to ourselves. Even just taking a few moments to put your hand over your heart and take 3 deep breaths can be the difference in a spiral or a moment where you realize that you're not alone. I believe God's always with you, has your best at heart, and you're going to get through it. Whether it's a good change or a bad change, our bodies sometimes read it the same way. And ultimately, our goal is always to come back to that sense of peace and stillness within our hearts and within our souls. Um, So, that is what I have. I love to encourage people in the online space. As a stay-at-home mom, oftentimes I felt super isolated, and the one thing that I could do was to put encouraging things out onto the internet. And so I love to do that. I have a newsletter that I try to give so much encouragement to people through, and I just love people. So I'd love to connect with you there. I don't know if anybody has any comments. I can't quite see the comments at this point, so I'm gonna close out my screen and come back to this, but I hope that is helpful to you.
Thank you, Jen. Exceptionally helpful. You can tell that you love people. So thank you for all you're doing to share your journey with us and those that you're interviewing and in your writing. There are some questions in the chat that I'm going to ask you. The first one is complete this sentence. The one thing that I wish I had done differently in life is.
Ooh,
It's the way I know.
the one thing. Um, the one thing I wish I had done differently in life, um, is to consistently understand, um, to consistently understand, um, how much one person can make a difference. Because I think that we go through life feeling as though we don't really matter, or maybe we can't do big things. I know for me, when I was thinking about writing a book, I truly wondered who did I think I was? Who did I think I was to do that, right? And I think as women, we have that voice all the time in our heads. Who do we think we are to do that? And I was sitting at the stoplight on my way to the grocery store, as all moms know, like we live there. That's our second place we live. And I
It's
was
true.
sitting at the stoplight and I heard a voice say, "Why not you?" And it was in that moment, I believe it was God saying, "Hey, why not you?" And I thought, all these other people that have gone out there and they've done the thing, right? They have book contracts. They're out there running nonprofits. They're making differences in their communities. They also probably had a "why not you" moment, right? And so that's what I would wish that I could change, is that I consistently had that moment like front and center in my mind. Why not you? Because can you imagine all the change that would happen in the world if each of us asked ourselves that question? Not who do I think I am, but why not you?
That's the power in spaces like days like today, because now we're all hearing it. If any of us were in doubt in some area in our lives, why not us? So I
Right.
appreciate you for sharing that. Thank you. Um, the next question is, what advice do you have for people who are also looking for friendship and community? It's a great question. Having lost yours and then finding one again.
Right, right. I think you start with what's available. I think so for as an example, I can remember that there was a Bible study that was going on, but they were meeting at the Panera that was like 20 minutes away. And I went the first night and I thought, I don't know if I want to keep going week after week. Like I have to drive all this way. And it felt like it was too much effort. And, you know, my husband, who knew that I desperately needed to be amongst other humans, was like, go and drive, go do it. You need this thing. And then it just so happened, you know, by chance that this Bible study was then moved 2 streets over from our house, right? And so I remember it only went for a summer, right? These people didn't become my lifelong friends. I don't have a nice pretty bow to tie this story up with. But what I can tell you is that it's worth the effort. And a lot of times when we are in a place of isolation, it's really hard to find that motivation to even make the smallest effort. And so that's what I would say is it's going to take some effort. It's not going to feel comfortable. You can't go into it expecting that you're going to meet your best friends, that you're going to spend your afternoons on a porch with when you're 80. Like you need to go into it just saying, for this moment in time, these are some people that I'm going to hang out with and just hold it lightly. Just hold it lightly. But that first step of effort has to be made. Unfortunately, I get it. I don't like the effort either, but it is what it is.
Thank you. And shout out to Ed for encouraging you to drive those 20
That's right.
minutes, we have to
That's right.
say.
He's a good guy.
He is indeed. And then the last question I see, and it's a two-parter, Jen. How
Okay.
do you prioritize your health and well-being? And are there any tips that you could share with us in the audience?
Sure. So, I try to look at health and well-being as a very holistic thing. So that's including mental health and spiritual health and physical health and all of those things. And so, um, I am pretty non-negotiable when it comes down to all of those. So I try to make time every single day to do a workout of some kind. Yoga is huge for me. I get on the treadmill, even if it's just for 10 minutes. I'll get on the treadmill for 10 minutes and then do, if it's a real short on time kind of day, a 15-minute yoga workout. And when I say workout, I mean it's a whole lot of stretching and deep breathing, but you would be really shocked at what spending 5 minutes laying flat on your back on the floor and just taking some deep breaths will do. And anyone that has kids at home, especially right now, I've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So
Breathe.
I am in it. I am
Yes.
in it. The deep breaths are non-negotiable at this stage
Yeah.
of life. And so I absolutely that's non-negotiable for me. I mean, I didn't have time to do any of that this morning. After we wrap up here, I will be on my yoga mat. Like I feel so deeply and strongly about that. The other thing that I mean, it's really right now it's everywhere in social media and for women that are of a certain age, but supplements do not negate the importance of having your natural minerals be at a good level. Because I went for a long time being incredibly anemic. My magnesium was through the floor. I was vitamin D deficient. And then I was wondering, why am I so depressed? And it turns out those things that we're made of are actually kind of really important to have enough of. So I would encourage everybody to make sure that they have at least a baseline understanding of where they are with just their normal vitamins and minerals. Because a lot of those things, boy, they affect us in ways that we can't even understand. And then, you know, the spiritual health, I sometimes connecting with God for me is just going in my backyard and watching the birds at the feeder. You know, like having that symbiotic relationship with nature, I think is so important. I am a nature lover. I'm a huge animal lover. And so anytime I can be around nature and see um just God's goodness outside is it it's life-changing. It's simple, but it really is. So if I can keep those kind of three things going, um, I feel typically pretty good.
Thank you. Well, amazing advice. Thank you. So in addition to what you just shared, we will all remember the questions you shared for us when we're experiencing change, especially when unexpected. Acknowledge that life looks different during change. Who do you want to be? Or we ask ourselves, who do I want to be through that change? What do I need to be that person? And that very important, recognizing that the goal is always peace. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone here in the Women Together International Conference that just hearing from you, and you have brought us peace. And I especially am thrilled that you were able to find yourself through your love of writing. So thank you. And I look forward to reading your books. Thank you,
Oh,
Jen.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
My
you. It's an
pleasure.
honor.